religion, politics, racism, sexuality. For some reason in our society, these are the issues nobody is supposed to openly talk about. I guess it's because we are a diverse group of people with various opinions and convictions, and we say we do not want to offend. But perhaps we're not a diverse group of people at all. What if you found out that we're just people? Just people who have openly or secretly pledged our allegiance to these different groups whose leaders then formed your opinion. Hi, my name is Troy White, and I believe that it's only by honest and open communication where we seek to understand more than we seek to be understood that we can begin to come together as a people who can appreciate our differences and perhaps more importantly understand that at our core, maybe we're not as different as we think. Are you ready to find out? Let's talk about it. Thanks for joining the conversation on today. I am Troy White, your host of Let's Talk About It with Troy White. I wanted to do another podcast recording today because of a lot of feedback that I've gotten on the last program that we did. So we're talking and continuing our discussion on politics. And I was very candid and very opinionated as it relates to the Electoral College, and I do maintain my position on that. But again, as I recorded in the last show, I do want to reiterate the necessity for everyone to get out and vote. As flawed as our system is, it is our system, and it's the only system that we have until we get up and do something to change our system, which I am going to speak more about that in programs to come. But I wanted to do something special and talk specifically about our voting. I have a special guest who's going to be joining us later in our conversation about voting. But I wanted to point out a couple of points that I thought was interesting, and perhaps it would be of interest to you as well. In our last presidential election back in 2008, President Barack Obama received 70 million votes from the population. People who were registered voters, 70 million of them voted for President Barack Obama, while Senator John McCain received just under 60 million. So again, President Obama, 70 million, Senator John McCain received 60 million in that election. 10 million more votes went to the president, making him the obvious choice to be the 44th president of the United States. 10 million people. Now, 10 million more votes. That was more received percentage-wise of the popular votes for the Democratic Party since Lyndon Johnson. So nobody else since Lyndon Johnson received that great of a margin of votes, 10 million more than his closest opponent, Senator McCain. Now, 10 million, that is a lot. It sounds like a lot. It is a lot. But what if I told you that in the state of Florida, and again, I live here in Florida, in the state of Florida, 4 million registered voters did not cast their vote at all. Now, he won by 10 million. And in the state of Florida now, at the time we have 27, I believe it is Electoral College. Now I think we have 29 members of the Electoral College. But of the populace vote alone, 4 million registered voters in the state of Florida did not vote. That's just in the state of Florida. Nationwide, I looked it up, 60 million registered voters in the United States of America failed to cast their votes in 2008. Now, assuming the Electoral College would have gone along with the wishes of the people like they usually do, 60 million people registered to vote and didn't vote in 2008. Remember, Senator McCain received 60 million votes. 60 million people failed to let their voice be heard. And so the question is, why? Why is it that so many of us failed to not only practice our right to vote, but as I mentioned in the last podcast, our duty to vote? 60 million people didn't think the decision of the President of the United States was something as important enough for them to get up and cast their vote. I want to encourage you not to be counted amongst those tens of millions of people who won't get up and vote. Hopefully you're registered by now. And I want to encourage you, in the state of Florida, it's already open. The early voting is already taking place. But wherever you live, whatever you do, cast your ballot for your candidate. And now I'll say this. In this election, particularly in this election, it seems like from the people who I've talked to, people are not so much voting for a candidate, but they're moreover voting against the candidate. I'd like your opinion on that. Are you voting? First of all, I'm hoping that you are voting for whatever your reason, whatever your motivation. I'm hoping that you are voting, but I would be interested in to know, are you voting for somebody, or is your vote for somebody really just because you're voting against somebody? A lot of Trump supporters are not voting for Donald Trump because he's their favorite Republican. They're voting for Donald Trump because they can't stand Hillary. Conversely, a lot of Hillary Clinton's voters are not voting for her because they think that she has just been wonderful or whatever, but they're voting for her because they can't stand Donald Trump. So today we're asking the question, who are you voting for and why? Are you voting against somebody, or do you feel strongly about a candidate and that's why you're going to cast your vote for them? Hopefully you are planning to vote, but we want to know why. What's your motivation? Got to take a quick break, but when we come back, the polls suggest that everybody already knows, they have made up their mind who they're going to vote for. But when we come back, Freya Huffman says, not so fast in this election. If you are Christian, you really need some divine intervention before you cast that ballot. She's the author of the book, Pray Before You Vote. We'll have that conversation when we come back. But in the meantime, please join the conversation. What's on your mind? Let's talk about it. So as promised, we are talking politics today, and I am with Freya Huffman, who wrote the book, Pray Before You Vote. You with me today, Freya?
Yes, I am, Troy. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. Tell me about this book. Why write a book with such a title, Pray Before You Vote?
Okay, so I really felt like I was inspired to write this book because of my own personal challenges with politics and religion. I grew up as a Democrat all of my life. My values were rooted in the Democratic Party, mainly because of the civil rights movement. My mother was very involved in the civil rights movement. She went to the Supreme Court to even help divide the line amongst our counties so votes would be counted properly. Also, she was discriminated against, and she had to also go to court to fight a discrimination suit for someone at the laundromat. We used to call it the wash house back in the day, but they would not let blacks use the laundromat, and so my mom had to fight. And so the Democratic Party to me represented the parties that fought for those that did not have a voice. And so once I was starting to grow up and again just really engaged in politics, I came to know more about the Lord and just some of the views that I believe that God had on certain issues. Now, that did not move the needle all the way over to the Republican Party. However, it did move the needle to more aligned with God's word instead of Freya's just background.
So what is your process when it comes to finding a candidate that you would want to get behind, whether it be Democrat or Republican or independent? What's your process?
So my process is really background. And for how have they fought for the people in the past? What type of political background do they have? If they don't have one, that's fine, but how do others measure them? And so that's what I look at. And also just look at even some of their values as well. Now, I know that everyone may not align with all the values that are in the Bible because, again, the people in the different parties, they seem to have values that are social, and then some even have values that are more moral. But as Christians, I really believe that we should all unite in the Word of God. So I do look at their background. I do look at the way they treat people, interact with people, and what they've done for the community. Again, they are running for a community office, so we expect them to do something for the community.
I hear you. When you look at whether it be Republican or Democrat, either side of them, as it relates to, you mentioned Christian values, either side would have some things that perhaps don't quite align with the values of the Christian faith.
I definitely agree. What I've seen, though, in the past, Troy, is that especially for the Republican Party. They reach out to the Christian community, as does the Democratic Party as well. But they reach out and they base the vote on one issue. And this one issue, I call it the moral litmus test. And so this is how I believe that many people have been pulling the Christian vote by this one issue.
What is that one issue?
That one issue that's most prevalent is abortion.
Okay.
Okay, and we're using that one issue as abortion, which is pro-life. And I don't personally agree with abortion. I believe that is against God. I also believe that when we're looking at how we treat people, and these are people that are grown, if you will, and that we don't even value that life. I consider that pro-life as well. And that challenge has been going on, especially as of late, starting with the Trayvon Martin death, and just how black lives really don't seem to equate to other lives. So I'm not making this about a black life, a blue life, or white life, but I do want to say pro-life is all-encompassing. And so when we have a politician that approaches us about just the one issue only, but they fail to look at all the other issues that are very important in our community, I feel like that's the way that we as Christians have been deceived. And so my challenge to Christians is that they don't just look at the one issue, because there are many issues that are important to God, so we look at the totality of it all.
We are with Freya Huffman, and she has written the book, Pray Before You Vote. And when we come back, we're going to ask her, God has given you the freedom to make your own decisions. Don't ask me about it. You go ahead and vote for yourself. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back, and we are talking politics today, and we're talking about why we should pray before we vote, if we should pray before we vote. We welcome your comments and questions as always. You can chime in. We love to hear what you have to say. I am with Freya Huffman, who wrote the book, Pray Before You Vote. So the question is, why now we're going to come back and put it on God? Could we say that no matter who gets in the office, the credit or the blame could be then pointed toward God? What's your thought?
Great question there, Troy. So, no, I don't say the blame is on God when the person that rises into the office is not the person, because, again, people are not seeking him when they're voting. So everyone's not engaging God in the process. I truly believe that when we do engage God in the process in terms of our prayer, and even if someone gets in office and that's not someone we really support, we should still pray for them, that we can turn the heart of the king because of where God tells us that.
Use this analogy. You got two football teams. They're playing each other. Both of them are trying to win the championship. On both teams, you have some Christians on the team who both before the game kneel and pray for victory. Mm-hmm. Now, both teams' prayer cannot be answered. So
that's a great analogy. So let's just say this was just the perfect election, and we had two Christians running. So if we did, when we prayed about it, now, really, in this case, we would both be winners. Let's just say they both believed in the same exact thing. There was no variation. Really, the Christian community would be winners regardless, because of, again, these candidates reflect Christian values. But that is not the case, and we're in the real world. We know that there's a Democratic and a Republican Party system for a reason, because of the values that are held. I did the study on both platforms, and again, Democrats care more about the people and the issues they're going through and how to pull someone up. And also the Republican Party believes that you should pull yourself up, and also they do profess more morality, and that really came along during the Ronald Reagan years. Now, if we fast forward to today, and even with this last Republican Party convention, the Republicans sounded more like the Democrats. And so I talk about it in the book, how we have to watch wolves in sheep's clothing on either side, but because there was a candidate, and I reference it in the book, who ran on the Republican ticket, and then he got in office and switched over to the Democratic ticket.
Sure.
We can't, as Christians, allow ourselves to be deceived.
I believe what we know of the candidates is based on the media. So the picture that is painted by either candidate via the media is what paints our thought process about the candidate. Now, the problem with that is the media is not all telling.
Take a look at the VP debate and even the presidential debate as well. You look at one news network said that Cain won, and the other said that Pence won, and it was the same debate. The political agenda is a marketing agenda. So when you brought up the question about the politicians putting out the face they want everyone to see, this is true, but as a Christian, we have to do our due diligence. The scriptures that really comes to mind is Matthew 23. It says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you're hypocrites, for you pay the tithe of the mint, anise, and cumin, but have neglected the weightier matters of the law, such as justice, mercy, and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone." So I ask people to check your heart. It was not so much about supporting a political party, and this is what I really want to leave with your listeners. The subtitle of my book is Jesus is not a Democrat or Republican, he's Lord. We've gotten so caught up into party politics that we're so loyal to a party that we're more loyal to the party than we are to the Word of God. And if you take a look at the book, there are interesting chapters. Chapters such as, can unsaved people lead us? Why do most African Americans vote for Democrats? Why do Christian Democrats and Republicans disagree? And what party would Jesus be affiliated with? And finally, I have a chapter called God is in Control. No matter who wins, we still have to seek God. But before we even allow this election to go through, we have to get registered. We want to get people and encourage them to get out and vote. You don't have a voice. Churches need to get involved. Pastors need to preach the Word of God, not their opinion. We need to bring people back to the Word of God because we are letting politics even divide the church. And so, again, I encourage you to get the book. It's called Pray Before You Vote. Jesus is not a Democrat or a Republican. Jesus is Lord. And you can find me at Freya Motivate with an S, Freya Motivate, on Instagram, Twitter, and also to my Facebook page. I really encourage you to go there. I include background information. I include information to help you do your research. It's called Book Pray Before You Vote. Share this with others. I'm not here to endorse or denounce a party or a candidate. God can use either side. I am here to endorse the Word of God.
She's the political evangelist, Freya Huffman, and the book is Pray Before You Vote. Thanks for joining us today.